If you're a B2B business, a B2B tech company, or a B2B marketer, you're in the right place. Coming to you from Studio 26, this is the Interesting B2B Marketers podcast, bringing you interesting contemporary takes, industry tips, guest interviews, and true stories from B2B marketers in the trenches. Now, here's your host, Steve Goldhaber.
Hey everybody, this is Steve. Welcome back to Interesting B2B Marketers, and welcome back to Studio 26. So today I'm excited to have John on our show. John, do a quick shout out to everyone.
Awesome. Hey, glad to be on here. Thanks for having me on, Steve.
All right, so we like to jump into case studies first, but before we do that, just a quick 60-second intro about who you are and what your background is.
Yeah, so I'm John. I spent the first 12 years of my career working in-house, mostly at B2B SaaS companies like LogMeIn, Workable, Yesware, and about 5 years ago, decided to go out on my own and start my own firm and start freelancing. And over time, that's kind of morphed into more of a demand generation agency.
Okay, awesome. So we're going to jump into case study number one. This one is all about scaling paid acquisition and content together. I love the combining of these two elements. Sometimes people just they think the paid acquisition world and the content world are two different things. So I like how there's integration points in here. So go ahead and take it away with your first case study.
Yeah, so my first case study comes from a company that I worked with that was in the HR space. I was the first US employee for this company, so helped them build out their office here, helped them scale paid acquisition up to where they were spending $300,000 a month and seeing profitability over a 12-month period with that paid acquisition spend. But about a year into working with them, once we had scaled paid, we added a content element to the company. So it was kind of interesting, the integration of them both. But essentially, we scaled up to spending $300,000 a month, then $700,000 a month purely on the Google Ads machine. And we started to realize we're reaching an inflection point where the amount of demand that exists on Google for terms in this industry were finite, especially the amount of terms in market for people who are looking for this specific product was quite finite. And our goal, as most SaaS companies' goal is in the early years, was to go from 1 million to 3 million to 9 million to 18 million to 36 to 72 million. And so we needed to invest in channels that compounded over time.
Yeah. So give us what's the business problem here? Are we trying to raise awareness? Is this all about, no, this is demand. We want to convert people. What were you trying to solve for?
We were trying to build awareness for the company with an audience that was largely in the SMB space. So really difficult to build a distribution machine into acquiring more of those small business audiences.
Yeah. And so you said this was mostly on Google's platform. Give us an idea of setting up that machine. I mean, you guys are spending a good chunk of money. What's the infrastructure look like on the advertising side and then also on the own side as it relates to where the traffic was headed?
Yeah. So when we were first setting up the paid acquisition channel, we actually built our own analytics tool internally to help us measure and understand the efficacy of these campaigns. Because one of the things that I've found in my career is broken with analytics, especially for B2B, is analytics looks on a user level at what somebody is doing. Sometimes it will look at cross-device movement from a user who's on their computer and then on their mobile device, but almost never do analytics solutions look at somebody who came in from a company and other people from that company who also joined the same product. And that's a huge tell, especially in product-led growth, of when you get multiple people from the same company all coming in and using your product, it's usually a really good indication that they're becoming interested to purchase your product. And so one of the key mandates that we had when we were building this internally, and I was really lucky to get engineering resources to help with marketing at this point in the company, but we built an attribution model that would look at data on an account level rather than on a person by person level. And the big challenge there is oftentimes we'll see the manager comes in and they create an account, set up an account, start looking at the software, or they don't even create an account. They may just come look at the site, go through a checklist of the features and capabilities that it has, and then give it off to their manager who comes in with the credit card, creates an account, and then ultimately swipes that card and pays you. And so a lot of the attribution tools out there, especially in web analytics, will provide 100% attribution to that direct visitor or that referral or that person who heard about it from somebody else on their team and comes in and pays with their credit card. And so we really wanted to be able to understand the account-based dynamics of how our product was, like what was initially introducing people to our product at all of these different companies. So what was behind those direct visits? What was behind the referrals?
Okay. So yeah, what you're describing makes sense to me. Give us a little glimpse into like, how do you technically make that happen? Or is it the data is there and you're just aggregating it, or are you doing something to harvest new data to get to that whole company view?
Yeah, so we would have account-based attribution that would look at the first user we had identified from a specific company coming in. So if you, let's say I'm a manager in the company, I come to the site, I look around, we would create a unique ID for that user. We'd store that unique ID for, I think, a couple of months, 30 to 60 days. And then later, when my manager came in and the director of my team came in and created an account and entered their credit card data, and I then joined that account, we would retroactively go back to, in an automated way, the analytics on that account and set up the source, medium, and funnel to align with the things that I had initially done on the site, the ways that I had initially found the website.
Okay. So now that you're in this environment where you're moving from user to company, once you first take a look at that data, like what's that like for the team? You know, what is the marketing reaction? What is the sales reaction as you get that different perspective? Is it what you expected?
Yeah. So I think what we often see is that there's a huge direct and branded search component to our marketing activities, and it can sometimes be tough to uncover what you're doing or what actually got that person to come to your site. And the older your company gets, the more difficult it gets to build that attribution for many reasons. But at this point, the company was around $1 million in revenue, and we were really focused on a couple of direct response channels, but we still saw direct traffic was growing through the lens of attribution in Google Analytics and some of the marketing automation platform that we're using. So we had some challenges there. And what we found was more attribution started being given to some of the upper funnel content that have been created within our content strategy. And we also found that upper funnel keyword terms in Google Ads were getting more attribution than the down funnel terms compared to the attribution models we saw in Google Analytics and Google Ads and those types of places.
It's always fascinating to me, the amount of analytics that the ad platforms will share with you, but naturally they are stacked to their advantage, meaning you just, so many times it's like, well, what do you know? We're going to suggest that you spend more dollars on the advertising side. And I mean, as someone, you're a lot closer to that. How do you embrace what the platforms offer, even though they have an agenda to have you spend more on it, versus like doing what you know is the right way to do it? Is it just you have to understand both worlds and figure out your own meaning?
Yeah. A key these days for marketers is understanding and leveraging data triangulation. So knowing what the strengths and weaknesses are of each platform you're working with are really critical. So at that point in time, we still knew Google Analytics provided some value to us because it gives really good on-site data about what users are looking at, how they're navigating your site, and the attribution data is pretty strong there. Google Ads is a really Google Ads-centric view of the world where they're going to count any person who clicked on a link at any time in their favor and, attribute that to the success of their campaigns. And so we had built another platform that worked really well for our company that I would consider as more in like the marketing automation realm of things, where we had an account-based approach to it. And then one other that I would recommend for companies to do is get your sales and marketing team or ask users when they're coming in the door how they heard about you. I like to have the sales team ask about it whenever possible, because I think they can hear some of the emotion in the response and can sometimes pass that on to the marketing team to give them an idea of the things that are working. But you can also ask about it in a form. But each of those has strengths and weaknesses to, what they provide.
Yeah, I love that of just asking someone the information that you're looking for, because it's really refreshing and sometimes it just cuts through a lot of the data. At the flip side, though, we know that people who report data in survey, like, you can't always trust it. Like,
Right.
it's people answer in ways that they think you want to hear them. Or if there's any incentives involved for collecting that data, then that is its own thing. But I do still believe in the strong just, how did you hear about our company?
Yeah,
Or what made you choose us over a competitor?
right. And we know, I go through the buying process. The best example, I bought a stand-up paddleboard a couple of years ago, and it was a pretty big purchase for me, above the normal day-to-day purchase size that I have. And so I thought about the process that I went through when I looked at it. And first, I got an Instagram ad about the brand that I was looking at. Then I read about it in reviews on a bunch of websites. Then I went to their website, checked out some of the different things. So there were many touch points that happened in that journey to me purchasing the stand-up paddleboard. And what I find when you ask that question in a form, you usually just get one channel. And that's often not the case. There's a lot of things that are impacting our decision on the way to us ultimately purchasing.
Yeah, cool. Anything else on this first case before we jump into number two?
No, I think, one of the key things that I found was really important in reporting up to the CEO in the company was understanding time to payback. So a lot of companies are focused on CAC to LTV ratio. And I think that especially early on, we were around $1 million in revenue. We were between 1 and 4 million in revenue in the time that I was talking about. And so LTV is going to be this metrics that's always changing for us. It's really difficult to calculate, and there are millions of different ways to calculate it. So I think one of the things that our analytics tool allowed us to measure and understand and easily track, and I would advocate other companies should focus on too, is not just CAC to LTV, but what is the amount of time it takes to get payback on your ad spend, on your marketing spend, on your marketing headcount, to really have a crisp idea of how much you should be spending and what's viable for your business.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. Let's jump into case study number two. And this one is about a little bit of the classic sales and marketing integration challenge, and then how you took that and made it better. I think that's something that B2B marketers everywhere, whether you're on the marketing side or the sales side, it's the same challenge. And it's a struggle that I'm interested to see how you guys solve for that. So go ahead, take it away, case study number two.
Yeah, so this one starts out with, I'd been working in a bunch of product-led growth companies in my career. Starting from my third job out of school was in product-led growth, and I'd kind of been in that industry segment for a while. And in my first role in SaaS, in product-led growth ever, I didn't have any interaction with the sales team. It was a bigger company. My role was just running paid search. And after a while, the job started to feel a little bit repetitive. I wanted something else. And so I jumped into a small product-led growth company, and I ran into issues in this first company as we started to build out the sales team. So the first 6 months I was at that company, there was nobody on the sales team. And we thought it was going to be a pure e-commerce play. We thought we were going to scale it up without needing any sales help. And we were really focused on driving no-touch customers into the product. About 6 months in, the challenge with sales and marketing integration from this one really came from the fact that as a marketer earlier in my career, I really wanted to be the primary growth engine within the company. So there was a little bit of ego built into this, but I worked in product-led motions, and I really, through those experiences in my career, had really seen how much marketing can do to kind of drive awareness, to build authority, and tee the sales team up or drive conversions without someone ever having to talk to the salesperson. So I don't think I had adequate maybe respect for the sales function at this point in my career. And so I was at a company, it was one of the smallest companies I ever had joined. I was employee number 10. For the first 6 months, we ran a primarily e-commerce focused PLG motion. So users would come in, they'd set up an account, they'd start a free trial, they'd get a finite number of events that they could use every month with our product. And when those ran out, they no longer were able to use it. We were able to convert a fair amount of those. Growth was not fast enough with that motion. We found over time that our best customers were more enterprise focused customers, and we needed to bring on a sales team in order to accelerate those sales based on the leads that we had coming in. Being naive, I didn't think about what impact scaling our sales team from 0 to 10 people over a couple of months would have. And there were a couple of things I missed at this at bat that then later on I learned better how to navigate certain situations. So I didn't understand the value of marketing automation at this point in my career. I didn't know how to sell it internally. I didn't understand why it would help me integrate better with the sales team. And I didn't build a strong enough case to really be aware of the changes that I would need to make in my top of funnel marketing motion and the middle of funnel focus that I would need to bring. So I thought marketing and demand generation at that point in time was all about dropping leads in, and the sales team would have an incredibly easy time converting those leads. So in this example, it didn't take long for me to get fired from the job. I think I lasted probably about 3 more months after we started hiring the sales team, maybe 6 months, but was always battling with the sales team about the leads that were coming in. And I was still just stuck in this motion that I had used for the first 6 months where, we grew fairly consistent. We grew really quickly. I was really proud of the accomplishments, but in order to get to the next level, what we had been doing just wasn't going to work over the next.
What was the feedback from the sales team when they were struggling to connect those two worlds? What did they tell you?
Yeah. So the sales team was upset. They were upset with the quality of the leads that were coming in. They were upset with how we were running marketing. They were upset with how leads were qualified to be passed to them. And I don't think it was a lack of good leads coming in the door. I think it was primarily that I just put no focus to the middle of the funnel. And really, once a lead came in, to pass that lead over to the sales team, somebody in sales operations would take that lead, they'd qualify those leads and distribute them to the marketing team. And in my next go around, so I had that job, I got let go, I ended up joining another company. And so 2 years later, I had another crack at.
You had redemption on your mind, right?
I had an opportunity for redemption. And the primary difference was that at that point in time, I'd kind of learned from my mistakes. I didn't think about the CRM, marketing automation, those things as just sales focused activities. I started to think about the CRM as the front end of marketing's presence to the sales team. So the CRM is the place where you can set that is your product as a marketer to the sales team. You want to know, let your sales team know the who, what, when, where, and why of the leads that are coming in. You want to be coaching them on how they should be following up on the leads. You want to be giving them insights into what types of accounts, what types of customers, firmographic, demographic data are coming in. And so at that point in time, I was armed with this kind of case study that then I took to the CEO at that time to say, hey, look, we need to get marketing automation in the door. We need to make sure it integrates with the CRM because I know you think I'm driving a lot of really high quality leads in the door because that had been my experience in both cases. Both CEOs were, no, just keep driving leads. We have so many leads coming in the door. It doesn't even matter, which is, in my opinion, or can be a red flag when you're working with CEOs when they're telling you that, not as focused on the quality down the funnel. When you hear that, it's time to educate them on how different leads are converting through the funnel. So I had a much better idea of how to set up the communication between the sales and marketing team. So one, it helped me build the case for building a marketing automation solution. I was much more in tune with the sales team and paying attention. And we set up goals where I like to say we created a healthy tension between sales and marketing in my second go at this challenge.
Yeah.
And so that means that we were gold on setting up meetings for our sales team. We couldn't control when the SDRs reached out to the leads. We couldn't control what language they were using in the email or how long it took for them to get on the call with those leads. So we didn't have we brought the leads in, we qualified them, we passed them to the sales team, and then they really had to get that meeting to set up a phone call. But I think providing that KPI that was a little down funnel, a little out of our reach, created some healthy tension because now our marketing team, our demand generation team started to focus on what funnels leads were coming in from that ultimately became trials. What were the characteristics of those leads? What channels they had come from? We started paying attention to all of these rather than just qualifying 80% of the leads, chucking them over the wall to the sales team saying, hey, you deal with it. And I think having that meeting metric really forced that. The other thing that I found was our marketing ops team in the second go around started to question the sales team, started to care about what happened after the lead was qualified to the sales team because our goal was focused on meetings. And so they would start to push on the sales team to follow up with leads quicker. And we were much more quick to realize bad qualification criteria that we needed to fix or new qualification criteria that we could use to fill up the bucket with even more qualified leads to pass to the sales team.
Yeah. It's interesting. The qualification process, whether that's on marketing or sales, what's always interesting is so many people look at it, I think, in a very flawed way, in that it's a binary thing. Are they qualified? Yes or no. And there's only two options, right? And the reality is there could be 15 different levels of qualification. Maybe the person's not ready to buy. Maybe they don't have the budget, even though they want to buy it. There's so many factors at play. So I wish we would get smarter at the qualification and not just have it today I'm not in market, but tomorrow, of course, I'm in market, right? There's got to be a better way to sort that out.
Yeah. And I think people underuse the steps in the qualification process to really be able to, you have leads. And in my opinion, that is likely companies that still need qualification to prove that they could one day buy your product, but should not get any sales attention. Then you have marketing qualified leads, which are companies that your sales team should likely be talking to, but right now might not be the good time. But I would still even when you're a closed lost lead, I still think leads should go into that qualified lead bucket. So your marketing team can stay in front of them and get them to the point where when they are ready to finally become a customer, it's easy for you to kind of see that based on the proprietary data that you have within your systems.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. I like the case study. Let's jump into the second part of the show, which is all about Q&A. Tell us about your first gig in B2B marketing. What was it like?
Yeah, so I was my first gig in B2B marketing was accidental. I didn't know I was getting into B2B marketing. I had just come from a consumer company and also didn't realize I was working in one of the first ever kind of product-led growth companies. And that has really shaped my thinking on demand generation and marketing and the types of leads and even the qualification that we use for qualifying those leads, because we were really focused on driving trials. We were really focused on driving low funnel intent leads. And it was a little bit of a new world to me, but it was incredibly foundational in terms of the career that it set me up for afterwards.
Yeah. It is interesting how those early jobs are so important. I remember I started doing marketing work in the B2C world, and the owners of the company were obsessed with customer satisfaction. And they really were like, if anything was ever a question, it was like, do what the customer wants, help the customer. And I worked at that business probably 2 years, right? And that's always been such a part of my DNA, because my first real marketing gig, and it just taught me the philosophical approach to taking care of customers. And I've been at many companies since then that have varying different stances. So I look back at my first gig too as thank God I was at a company that had a good vision, for taking care of their customers, because other companies, they'll say that they're customer centric, but they're not. They have other things on their mind. What do you enjoy most about B2B? For some people, it's it's complex. Other people, it's I love the data. What do you enjoy the most?
I would say I enjoy the complexity. I am someone who enjoys the puzzles in my job that I'm constantly forced to kind of put together. And so I think there are puzzle pieces like matching the data with the customer, with figuring out the right ways to drive those users into your company. So I really enjoy that aspect of putting all these different puzzle pieces together in order to figure out a nice growth solution. There's always a lot that happens that's going on in B2B marketing between what your growth goals are, the time it takes to actually close deals, and the different channels that you want to leverage in order to drive that growth.
Yeah. What drives you nuts? If I could hand you a baseball bat right now, what are you inclined to just say, I can't take it anymore. I'm done with this aspect of marketing.
Yeah, I'm done with the debates on social about what language we should be using. So there's been an attack on the MQL over the last couple of years, and I think that I can understand why people are saying, "Oh, the marketing qualified lead step," but to me, it's the second stage in the marketing and sales process. It helps you qualify leads so you're passing the right leads over to the sales team. And I think a lot of people attack it because it was initially thought of as, you gate content, you drive those leads in, then you have an SDR team bang on the phones to get that person who filled in an ebook to come in. But I see too many of these debates around what language we should be using and not enough kind of actual helpful information in marketing to help people actually do a better job. So I'm sick of that.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on when you've had a really good relationship with sales, what's going on? Why is it working really well?
I think what is going well is one, there's a mutual respect. So sales and marketing has changed. That dynamic has changed over the years where marketing really is playing a bigger role in how the customer comes in, how they're educated, and how well they're set up for the sales team. And so, 10 years ago, a VP of sales wasn't used to that. They were used to marketing would design PDFs and, help set up the booth at the conference and help support the outbound effort. And so I think so there wasn't a lot of mutual respect. And so mutual respect is really a key element of that. And then I think, and this is key, is a kind of mutual affinity and mutual understanding of who the customer is. Because when marketing and sales are misaligned on who the customer is, one team thinks it should be enterprise customer and wants to close $50,000 to $100,000 deals, and the marketing team often is the one focused on smaller deal sizes but getting more volume.
Yep.
That can really throw off the team, and it leads you to these kind of inevitable breakups where one of the people on either team needs to leave because their vision doesn't really align with the other ones.
Maybe we can do a podcast just called sales and marketing breakups. Just stories of what went wrong.
Yeah.
And I think you are onto something here with the whole definition of the customer, because I've seen that as well, where the salespeople who are naturally, they're incented by comp, they want bigger deals. They'd rather work 5 big deals,
right,
as opposed to handle 30, 50, 75 smaller deals. It's just what's worth their time.
Right.
And I think that clarification, it's hard to get from sales or marketing. Usually you need someone in the C-suite to provide that clarity. Otherwise, like you said, marketers, I think the marketers are more wired to kind of say, hey, I can do the heavy lifting on my own. So that means go smaller, do more like traditional B2C marketing. It's not a right or wrong thing. It's really just who is gonna, who's the product or service meant for?
Right.
Who is enjoying it much? What does the retention rate look like? That's one thing I've always looked like to really break any ties is when you look at the data around who our company's best customers are, what do they all have in common? What is their size? What are their verticals? And those are some of those longer term decisions to make so that you can even say, hey, you know what? On the front end, it's worth paying twice as much money to acquire someone because we know on the back end, that's our best customer. So we can go over our targeted spend if we know we're talking to the right person. I think that's also a thing that I've seen in my career is the front end and the back end just not talking to another. So the front end foolishly just says, well, we know that cheaper, more efficient media is better. So let's just do that. And we can just, every year we'll say, hey, we were 10% more efficient. We're doing a good job. And there's good intent in that decision, but sometimes you can steer a company really down a bad path because you don't have an understanding of who your most profitable customers are.
Right. Yeah. And that I've talked about it before. I think the CPL metric is one of the, worst metrics to be paying attention to, because if you drop your cost per lead and you're running paid campaigns or something like that, when you see that CPL drops, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a good thing for your sales team. You might be just getting a lot smaller companies coming in the door, a lot lower quality coming in the door. And so while your cost per lead goes down, it doesn't necessarily mean the amount of customers you have are going up. So I agree 100%.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to end with one final question here. What advice do you have for everyone listening to the show about marrying the sales and marketing relationship as it relates to like the analytics? What's one thing that they could do what's a quick win in the next week that they could do to have a better relationship?
So I would recommend writing an SLA down with your sales team that focuses on the quality of the qualifications of leads that marketing is going to be bringing in and passing to the sales, and make sure there's a handshake agreement there. Also focus on a handshake agreement of what the quantity of those leads is that marketing is gold on driving on a monthly and quarterly basis. And then on the sales side of things, they should have a cadence of how quickly they need to follow up with leads, how many times they should be following up with those leads. And that will really help make sure you're aligned on who that ideal customer is. And it's also something that can be not personal, that you can point to say, hey, look, here's our SLA. Do we need to make changes to this? Are you not happy with the leads that we're driving in because they're fitting the qualifications that we agreed upon?
Yeah. All right, cool. I like that advice. All right, John. Well, I appreciate you joining us for the podcast today. Thank you for all the listeners. You can find Interesting B2B Marketers in several places. The more popular ones are within Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can go to 26characters.com, and that's another way to access all the content. So thank you again for everyone for listening, and thank you, John, for sharing your stories today.
All right, thank you.
All right, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Interesting B2B Marketers podcast. Be sure to subscribe wherever you heard this podcast so you never miss an episode. If you found value in today's episode, please help grow the podcast by sharing with others and leaving a review. We'll see you next time.